The mourner's room was never meant for the living, where the curtains never moved. I had worked at the funeral home for 5 months before. I noticed the hallway that didn't exist. I say it didn't exist not because it was hidden behind a wall or cleverly disguised, but because every time I walked past the same stretch of corridor, it wasn't there. Until it was. That's the kind of thing you learn to stop questioning when you work among the dead. Doors open. Walls shift. Names appear on tags you don't remember writing. And some rooms remember you before you ever step inside. It was late. I'd stayed behind after the last service to sweep the chapel and return the prayer books. The air still smelled like lily and regret. Morning perfume clung to the pews, a mixture of lavender, powder, and grief that stuck to the tongue like damp cotton. I walked the long corridor toward the back offices when I felt something behind me. Not footsteps, not breath, just the subtle shift of expectation, like someone had been waiting for me to turn around. And when I did, there it was, a hallway I had never seen. Narrow, dark, at the very end, a single door. I approached slowly. Each step felt like I was walking into a memory I hadn't made yet. The light above the door flickered weakly, enough to illuminate a plaque nailed slightly off-center. The brass letters were old, cracked, and dull, but one word remained, despite the rust: mourners. I didn't know what I expected when I pushed the door open. Another forgotten storage room? A prayer closet? But not this. It was a room with velvet drapes on every wall, crimson, heavy, too thick for a place like this. The light was dim and golden, like an oil lamp had just gone out. At the center sat a single, high-backed chair, facing the far wall. Not a mirror, not a window. Just more curtain. Everything about the space whispered, "Sit." But I didn't, not yet. Instead, I listened, and that's when I heard it. From behind the curtain. Breathing. Soft, rhythmic, not quite human, and a voice, not loud, not panicked, just present. They only hear you when you cry. I should have left, but the rules of grief are strange, and the deeper you wade into its waters, the less sense time makes. So I sat. The chair was warm, not recently occupied, but still remembering the weight of someone long gone. As soon as I settled, the air in the room changed. The breathing stopped, but something else began. The curtains in front of me parted slightly, just enough to show a sliver of what lay behind them, and I swear, it wasn't a wall. It was a face. Not alive, not dead, frozen. Like a photograph taken just after the subject realized they were being watched. Eyes wide, lips parted, but no movement. Stillness that pressed on your chest like sleep. Paralysis. I couldn't speak. I didn't have to, because behind Emmy, a whisper crept through the fabric of the room. This is where sorrow watches you back. I blinked. And the curtains were closed again. The warmth in the chair faded, and the room was still. I stood, legs trembling, walked to the door. It didn't open. At first. Only when I whispered, "I see you." Then clicked. The handle turned, and the hallway was gone again. The next morning, I asked Henry, our oldest embalmer, if he knew anything about the mourner's room. His expression didn't change. He just took a sip of coffee, stared out the window, and said, "You didn't cry, did you?" I didn't answer, because I didn't understand the question. The days that followed were strange. I began hearing the breathing, even in other rooms. Whispers when I passed the flower arrangements. Tears in the hiss of the urns being sealed. Every time someone walked past me in grief, I could feel it, the sorrow brushing against my skin like cold wind from an open casket. But the worst came a week later, when a woman came in alone. No family, no friends. She wore a gray scarf and held a small urn clutched to her chest like a dying heartbeat. She didn't cry, she only whispered, "Is there a place for mourners who can't mourn out loud?" I should have said no, should have pointed her to the chapel or the memorial garden. But something inside me answered before I could think, "Follow me." The hallway was there, Just like before, the door still worn, the plaque still bearing its single, rusted word. I opened it. She stepped inside. I didn't. The door closed gently behind her. And for a moment, I heard nothing. No whispers. No breathing. Only the sound of her silence finally being heard when she came out. An hour later, her scarf was damp with tears, but her hands no longer trembled, and she whispered to me, "Thank you for letting me be seen." After that, others came. They didn't ask. They just looked at me a certain way, that heavy, glassy stare of someone who's been carrying a scream in their chest too long, and I'd nod, and the hallway would be there. Always when it needed to be. Each time someone entered, I'd wait outside. And each time, I'd hear different things. A lullaby. A prayer. Sometimes nothing at all. But always when they returned, their faces looked different. Not healed. Not whole, but recognized. As if grief had finally spoken their name out loud. One night, I decided to return. Alone. To ask the room a question I hadn't dared until now. Who do you mourn? Because it was clear to me now. The room itself was grieving, not just the living, not just the dead, but something in between. Entered. Sat. The chair still warm, the curtain still unmoving, but the voice came again. This time behind me. I mourn what is never said, the weeping that waits behind politeness, the screams beneath silence, the grief that has no witnesses. And then a flicker of light behind the curtain, a flash like a projector illuminating film that had never been developed, and I saw her. My mother, not dead, not quite, living. Frozen. In the moment before she told me everything was fine, before she shut the bedroom door and cried for the last time, before I heard the bottle open, before the room filled with silence, and I realized this was her room. 2. The mourner's room didn't belong to the dead. It belonged to those whose pain was swallowed by the world's indifference. To those who sat beside coffins with dry eyes and bleeding hearts. To those who said, "I'm fine," while breaking. To me. The curtains opened, fully this time, and behind them, mirror, but not a normal one. It showed me sitting in the chair, but my reflection was weeping, uncontrollably, shoulders shaking, hands covering my face, and it was the most honest thing I had ever seen, because it wasn't what I looked like. It was what I had buried. And in that moment, I cried. 2. Not to match the mirror. To free it. When I left the room that night, the hallway didn't vanish. Not right away. It stayed open long enough for me to whisper back to the room, "You are not alone either." I no longer work at the funeral home, but I know the room still exists, somewhere, in a hallway that appears when sorrow needs a witness. You might find it behind a church. In an abandoned hospital. In the corner of your grandmother's attic. Or maybe in the silence you keep pretending isn't breaking you. And when you do find it, sit. Listen. Cry. And know, the mourner's room was never meant for the living. It was meant for those who were never allowed to grieve while alive. The mirror behind the curtain remembers faces I forgot. The mirror never followed me home, but the reflection did. Ever since I left the mourner's room that night, the one where I saw myself crying through glass that never showed truth before, something's changed. It's not that the world is different. The streets are still cracked. The air still tastes like the leftover breath of the dead. People still say, "I'm fine," when they mean I'm drowning. But my eyes, they've changed. I see what's beneath now. I see the withheld tears in a stranger's posture. I see the way people flinch when someone says their loved one's name like it's a question. I see the mourning in places that pretend to be sacred, like hospitals, grocery store aisles, park benches, voicemail boxes. And I see the reflection of a truth I used to bury. I never knew how to grieve. I only knew how to carry. It began 3 days after I left the funeral home. I had packed everything. Uniform folded, shoes cleaned but still stained by years of grave dust. My badge just plastic, but heavy with memory, tucked into a drawer I never opened. I thought I'd sleep. Instead, I dreamed of faces I didn't recognize. At first they were blurry. Then they sharpened, not ghosts. Not visitors. Reflections. Of people I had once heard cry behind the curtain. One by one, they appeared in my dreams, mouths open, hands trembling, eyes asking the same silent question. Did I ever really matter? I woke each time with sweat clinging to my chest like frost. But what terrified me most was that I recognized every single one. These weren't strangers. These were the mourners who had walked into that secret hallway, who had cried in the chair I once sat in, who had whispered into the heavy velvet air that held their grief like lungs gasping for release. But their names? I couldn't remember. And the mirror, it didn't forgive forgetfulness. I went back to the funeral home, not to work, just to look. The building was locked, but the windows still wept condensation. I stood at the far edge of the parking lot, where the shadows always stretched longer than they should, and I whispered, "Mourner's room." The hallway did not appear, but something did. In the sky, a sudden flicker, like a lightning flash without thunder. And in it, a face. Startled. Startling. A woman. Late 30s, eyes like the sky before snow. Her name was gone, but the grief remained. She had wept in that room, and I had left her behind. I began to write them down, every face, every detail. No names, just impressions. I filled a notebook in a week, and still they came, every night. More mourners. Not begging, not accusing. Just wanting to be remembered. And in remembering them, something strange began to happen. I started seeing them in real life. At the coffee shop, I saw the man with shaking fingers from the third night. In the pharmacy, the girl who had clutched a teddy bear soaked in tears. At the library, the old woman who used to rock slowly in the chair before her voice cracked into silence. They didn't know me, but I knew them, and when our eyes met, they paused. Tilted their heads, like they almost remembered something. And sometimes, they smiled. Not the smile of recognition, the smile of someone whose pain has just been seen. Even for a moment, I returned home each night and stared at my bathroom mirror, not to check my hair, not to wash my face. To see if the mourner's mirror had followed me. It hadn't, but something had. The silence, not emptiness, pregnant silence. The kind that comes just before something important is said. Or broken. I began speaking out loud. To the mirror. I remember you. I remember what you carried. I remember how you cried. I remember that you mattered. And sometimes, the mirror fogged over, as if it too were exhaling. One night, I awoke not in my bed, but in a chair. High back. Warm. Velvet. Curtains in front of me. Golden light behind. The mourner's room. But I hadn't entered it. It had entered me. The curtain in front of me shifted. And from behind it, a mirror again. Only this time, it didn't show me. It showed my brother. The one I hadn't spoken to in years. The one who said the wrong thing at the funeral. The one I never forgave. In the mirror, he was sitting alone. In his kitchen, crying over a photo I didn't know he had kept. And in that moment, I knew he had mourned, too. He just hadn't been allowed to, because I hadn't let him. I woke up sobbing, not because I missed him, because I had stolen from him the right to grieve. I called him. No hello. Just silence. And then, "I'm sorry," he cried, and I listened. Like the mourner's room had taught me to. From then on, I knew what my purpose had become. I was no longer the keeper of death. I was the rememberer of grief. The one who holds space for unspoken sorrow. The one who doesn't ask questions. The one who simply says, "You may cry here." I've since built a small wooden chair in my home, placed it against the far wall, surrounded it with deep red curtains. Not for performance, for permission. Anyone who enters my space and carries pain, I show them the chair. I don't ask what happened. I simply say, "This is the mourner's room now, and you are allowed." The mirror no longer shows me crying. It shows them. All of them, and they are beautiful in their breaking. because nothing is more honest than sorrow that dares to be witnessed. If you ever find the hallway, the one that shouldn't exist, walk down it, even if your knees tremble, even if your throat is dry with all the screams. You never let out. Sit in the chair, face the curtain, and let the mirror show you the face of what you've buried. It won't hurt you. It will remember you. And sometimes that's all we need. To be remembered exactly as we are. They bring flowers, but the roots know who's missing. I used to think funerals were for the dead, that they were rituals meant to honor those who could no longer hear the eulogies, no longer smell the lily, no longer be hurt by what was never said. But the mourner's room taught me different. Funerals are for the absences, and sometimes the greatest absence is the person who is still breathing. It began with a delivery, a bouquet. Unremarkable at first glance, white lily, dusty pink roses, a ribbon with golden script that read, "Gone, but not forgotten." It had no sender. The florist was confused. Paid in cash. No return address. I hadn't ordered flowers. No one had died. Not recently anyway. But when I opened the card, I froze. There was no message. Only a name. Mine. And beneath it, a single phrase. The root remembers what the stem forgets. I placed the bouquet near the wooden chair in my makeshift mourner's room. Not to honor the gift, to confront it, because something about that arrangement felt wrong. The roses wilted too quickly. By the second day, their petals were soft as tissue soaked in grief. The lily held their shape, but their scent turned metallic. On the third day, I noticed dirt beneath the chair. Fresh, damp. I hadn't brought any in. I hadn't touched the floor. And when I bent to sweep it, my fingers touched something beneath the curtain that hadn't been there before. A root. Thick, twisted, cold as bone. And wrapped around it was a ribbon, frayed at the ends, embroidered with another name, Delilah. Delilah. The name trembled through me like a hymn I had forgotten how to sing. Hadn't spoken her name in 10 years. Not since I stood beside her casket and lied to everyone there. Told them she passed, peacefully. Told them she knew she was loved. Told them I would never forget her, but I did, piece by piece, year by year, not out of cruelty, out of survival. Because mourning her, truth would have destroyed me. Delilah was not a family member. She was not a lover. She was not anything the world would have let me grieve openly. But she was the only person who had ever looked at me and said, "You are not too much." And when she left by her own hand, in silence, without a note, I told myself she hadn't meant to. But the mourner's room doesn't entertain delusion. It remembers what you erased, and it brings it back in roots that grow from beneath your guilt. I sat in the chair. Again. And this time, the curtains parted without a sound. The mirror was already lit out and Delilah was there. Not alive. Not dead. Frozen. In that last moment, when she smiled too wide and said she was okay. And I knew she wasn't, but I didn't stop her. I didn't ask. I didn't hold on. The mirror shimmered. And then, she moved, just her hand. Slowly lifting. Pointing. At me. At the flowers. I turned, and the bouquet was no longer roses and lily. It had changed. Now it was made of paper. Each petal torn from pages of her journal. Each word a cry I never heard. Each stem wrapped in phrases I should have said. I see you. You matter. Don't go. The ground beneath the chair grew soft. The roots rose higher. They wrapped around the legs. They pulsed, and I realized they weren't roots. They were veins, Delilah's, still carrying the blood of her pain into the floorboards of my denial. I whispered her name. Once. Then again, then louder, until the room filled with it. Delilah, Delilah, and the mirror wept. Not fog. Not rain. Tears. Real tears. And with each drop, a petal fell from the bouquet, until only the stems remained. Hollow. Like bones. Like me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat beside the chair. I placed the ribbon in my lap, and I wrote her name again and again until my hand cramped. Then, I burned the paper, not to forget to offer. Because some names aren't meant to be buried. They're meant to be sung back into the world. The next morning, the ground beneath the chair was dry again, the roots gone. The bouquet nothing more than ash and soil, but a new ribbon had appeared, wrapped gently around the arm of the chair, waiting. I knew then the mourner's room had changed. It was no longer just a place for those who entered. It was becoming something else. A living memory, a ritual, a reclamation. And it was asking me, who else have you forgotten? I took the ribbon, and I wrote another name, one I had never dared speak out loud. My own, because even I, the one who held space for grief, had never mourned myself. The chair remembers who you pretend to be. The day I wrote my own name on the ribbon, the chair creaked. Not from age, not from pressure, but from recognition. It was the first time I had placed myself among the mourned. Until then, I was the watcher, the guide, the keeper of keys to a door no one else remembered. But the mourner's room never saw me as separate. It had been waiting. Patient. For the moment I finally admitted that I was grieving someone too. Me, the version of myself I left behind in every place I pretended to be fine. I tied the ribbon around the armrest with my name written in black ink. 3 simple letters that never felt like mine until that moment. It was strange how heavy they looked when wrapped in grief. The curtain didn't move, the mirror didn't shimmer, but the chair leaned forward. Subtle. A gesture so slight I might have imagined it, but I knew what it meant. It was inviting me, not just to sit. To surrender. I lowered myself into it like one lowers themselves into memory. Carefully, breath held, braced for impact. The fabric felt warmer this time, alive almost, not just velvet, but pulsing, like the seat itself had a heartbeat. My own, echoing back at me in a rhythm I didn't remember giving. And then the room began to whisper. But this time, it wasn't voices. It was versions. The first appeared in the mirror, seated just as I was, but younger, 16 maybe, eyes too wide, smiling too hard, trying too much. Wearing a shirt that didn't fit, but pretending it did. This was the Emmy who first learned that acceptance was a performance, who swallowed their difference and wore costumes made of silence. Who learned to speak in tones that didn't shake. To walk in ways that didn't draw attention. To erase themselves with grace. And the mirror whispered, he is not gone. You just stopped looking for him. I blinked. And the image changed. 23, now polished, composed, the one who succeeded, graduated with honors. Made parents proud, held back tears in photos because success meant you're not allowed to cry. This version stared back with resentment. Not at the world. At me. Because I had never once stopped to ask if he was okay, only if he was impressive. Another flicker. 30-1. This one looked tired. Eyes sunken. Jaw clenched. The version of me who buried grief under overworking, who turned exhaustion into virtue, who said, I'm just busy, instead of I'm breaking. He didn't speak. He just stared, holding a phone with a message he never sent. I need help. The chair pulsed beneath me. Not in comfort. In demand. The mirror was not a reflection anymore. It was an intervention. And the room whispered, you mourned them by becoming who they had to be. Now mourn yourself by remembering who you never let live. I wanted to run, but the door wouldn't open, and the curtain closed behind the mirror. Only darkness now, but from within it, a figure stepped forward. And this time, it wasn't me. It was her. The one I had crafted. The persona, the version of myself I wore like armor. Smiling. Charming. Capable. Savior of everyone else's breakdowns. Builder of everyone else's peace. But behind the mask, a face carved hollow from pretending. She stepped closer, and her voice, my voice, said, you used me to survive. Now let me die in peace. I didn't cry. Not at first. I apologized. To her, Dot to all of them, dot to the versions I never gave funerals to, dot to the identities I used to please, dot to the masks I never removed. And then the chair exhaled, dot, and for the first time I grieved myself, dot. It didn't come all at once, not like a flood, more like peeling, layer after layer of words I never spoke, tears I told myself weren't deserved, truths I dismissed as inconvenient. I whispered into the silence, I miss me. And from the dark behind the curtain came a chorus, all the versions of me, answering in unison, we're still here. We just need you to stop hiding us. When I opened my eyes, the chair was empty again, dot cool, dot still, dot, and the ribbon with my name gone, dot. In its place was a seed, dot small, dot ordinary, dot wrapped in parchment that read, you buried yourself, now grow. I planted it, dot, in the backyard, dot under the moonlight, dot no ceremony, dot just my hands in the soil, dot soft, dot forgiving, dot by morning. A single sprout had appeared, dot not much, but enough, dot enough to remind me that morning isn't just about endings, sometimes it's about permission to begin again. People often ask why I left the funeral business, why I stopped tending to the dead. I tell them, I didn't stop. I just started including the living. Because so many of us walk this world already buried, dot in expectations, in silence, in versions of ourselves we think others need, and we forget we too deserve to be mourned, dot, and remembered, dot, and replanted. If you ever find yourself pretending again, if the smile feels like a weight, if the chair calls to you, go, dot, sit, dot, let the curtain close, let the versions appear, mourn who you pretended to be, dot, and then rise, not as someone new, dot, as someone finally real. The names on the wall were never written by the living. Some walls are built to protect you, others to remind you what you failed to protect. The mourner's room had one of those, wall that didn't exist when I first stepped in, that didn't appear on any blueprint, that couldn't be touched unless you remembered it. And when you did, it was already too late to forget, dot. It began after the night I mourned myself, dot, after I planted the seed, after the silence in the chair no longer felt hollow but whole. I thought the room would rest, that its hunger had been sated. But memory is not a thing that starves. It grows, dot, and growth demands roots, dot. Roots need names, and names, they write themselves, dot. It was early, dot. The house, still steeped in half-darkness, the kind that comes just before dawn, when even time seems unsure. I walked past the chair to open the curtain and found it, a wall, where there had never been one. Not brick, not plaster, something in between, rough like bark, but warm like skin. On it names, dot, hundreds, dot, maybe thousands, etched not with ink, but with grief. Some were full names, some were just initials, some weren't even letters, just marks, scratches, fingerprints, but all of them felt known, like a language I didn't remember learning, but somehow understood. One name stopped me, AJ. I stared at it for a long time, couldn't place the initials, didn't know the story, but my chest tightened like I was supposed to. And that's when it clicked. These weren't names I remembered. These were names that remembered me. I ran my fingers over the letters, dot. They were warm, dot, soft at first, dot, but then something shifted, dot. The wall trembled, only slightly, but enough for the air to change, dot, to thicken, dot, to begin to hum, dot. It wasn't sound, dot, it was presence, dot, and suddenly I remembered who AJ was, dot. We were 8, dot, third grade. He sat next to me during silent reading. He used to hum to himself little songs he made up, nonsense melodies about monsters and magic and names no one else knew. The other kids mocked him. He never seemed to care, until one day he stopped humming, and then he stopped speaking, dot, and then he was gone. They said he moved, that his family left in the night, but I remember the way the teacher's eyes looked. The next day, like something had been erased. AJ had once whispered to me that he had dreams he wasn't allowed to say out loud, dot, that sometimes he woke up and still felt like he was underwater, that his mom said boys shouldn't cry, and that if he disappeared, it would be because no one ever really saw him. I hadn't thought of him in decades, hadn't spoken his name, until the wall did. Until the mourners' room whispered, "Even forgotten ghosts remember who looked away." I pressed my palm against the initials. And the wall opened. Not literally, but in memory. In Emery. In me. I remembered the way AJ used to draw stars with 6 points. The way he giggled whenever someone sneezed. The way he once told me that he didn't want to grow up because adults always looked sad when no one was watching. I whispered, "I'm sorry." And a breeze moved through the room. A breeze that had no source, that carried with it the smell of pencils and lunchbox sandwiches. A breeze that whispered back, "I was just waiting for someone to say my name." More names appeared. E.M. Joshua. Lena. So many. Each one a story I had buried beneath the noise of survival. Some were children. Some were elders. Some were moments, because sometimes the names weren't people. They were versions of me. Of others, of us. Names like hope before the divorce, laughter before the hospital call, trust before the betrayal. They were written there too, because the wall didn't care for linear time. It only cared for what we abandoned. I spent hours tracing them, each touch unlocking a thread, a story, a sigh, sometimes a sob, other times just stillness. The kind of stillness that wraps around a truth too tender to touch. At some point, I noticed something new. A section of the wall that pulsed slightly when I neared it, like it knew me, feared. M. Or both. The names there weren't etched. They were scratched. Desperate. Jagged. Rushed. And at the center, a name that made my knees give out. Jonah. My friend. No. My almost. The one who saw me before I was ready to be seen. Who offered his heart in the softest way, with long conversations in parked cars, with mixtapes of songs he never said were about me, with silence that held space instead of shame. I never answered him, not directly. I laughed. Deflected. Said, "Let's not ruin the friendship." And then I disappeared. I ghosted him before ghosting had a name, because I was afraid. Of being known. Of being changed. Of being loved where I had only ever hidden. I hadn't heard his name in years. Didn't know where he ended up. Only that he deserved more than what I gave, and the wall, it didn't let me forget. Didn't punish me. Just reminded me. I touched his name, whispered again, "I'm sorry." And the wall shuddered. Then it released something, a sound, a melody, a fragment of the mixtape Jonah made, the one I never told him I kept. And in the mourner's room, that music played. Soft. Echoed. Sacred. I cried. For him. For me. For all the people we become and unbecome through silence. For all the names we don't say out loud because we're afraid of what they hold. For all the ghosts that walk beside us, hoping to be seen just once more. The wall isn't finished. It never will be, because grief isn't an archive. It's a garden. And every name written, there's a seed. Some grow quietly, others burst through the soil of memory with thorns and fire. But all of them are real, if you ever find your name there. Don't be afraid. It doesn't mean you've died. It means you've been carried. By someone. Somewhere. It means you mattered. Even if you were forgotten by lips, you were never forgotten by the soul. Some echoes don't want to be heard, but they stay anyway. There are echoes that haunt you, not because they scream, not because they follow, but because they were never meant to be heard, only felt, like the breath of someone who almost said goodbye, like the footsteps of a memory you refused to name, like the silence after a question you should have asked. These are the echoes that fill the mourner's room at night, and I had begun to hear them. It started after I touched Jonah's name on the wall. After the music faded, after the air grew still, I thought I had honored something, maybe even healed. But the mourner's room doesn't reward healing with silence. It rewards it with depth. And that night, I fell into it. It was nearly 3 a.m., that hour when even ghosts seem to rest. but I felt it. The vibration, subtle, beneath. The chair, in the walls, like someone pacing, but only in memory. Then a breath, not mine, long, wounded, held too long and released too late. I turned, and the room had changed again. The wall of names was gone, or hidden. In its place was a corridor, narrow, dim, lit, only by flickering lanterns made of glass and sorrow. I knew I wasn't dreaming. The mourner's room doesn't deal in illusion. It builds spaces out of what you avoid. And I had been avoiding her. The corridor pulsed with her, not a ghost, not a memory. Something between. I stepped forward. The air grew heavier with each footfall, like walking through grief that had not been mine to carry, but I had carried it anyway. At the end of the hallway was a door, wooden, cracked, familiar. I knew it before I touched it. I had seen it once in a hospital, outside the room where she died. My aunt, not by blood, but by bond. She raised me more than my mother ever did, not with tenderness, but with rules, sharp ones. No crying, no weakness, no truth spoken that others might judge. She loved with silence, fed with guilt, and praised with absence. But I had loved her, and when she died, I did not grieve. Not properly, because grief for someone who both held and hurt you is a wound with no clean edge. The door opened on its own, and I stepped into the room. It was not a hospital. It was her kitchen. As it was when I was 10. The table, the smell of burnt coffee, the chair where she smoked too much and spoke too little. She sat there now, not as a ghost, not quite alive, just present. An echo, as she looked up at me. Eyes that still demanded strength, but this time something else too. Permission. I sat across from her. No words, just breath, tense, trembling, true. Then she spoke. You've become soft. A familiar wound. I braced. But then she added, and I hope you stay that way. I didn't understand at first. She reached for a box. Wooden, carved with patterns I recognized from her sewing room. Inside letters. All addressed to me. None sent. I read them, hands shaking. They were full of words she never said. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to love without control. You reminded me of everything I silenced in myself. I was afraid. And at the bottom of the box, a photo of her. As a child. Smiling. Wide-eyed. Before life taught her to be cold. Before silence became survival. And on the back, written in fading ink, I miss her too. I looked up. She was gone. The kitchen faded, and I was back in the mourner's room. The chair warm. The air still humming, the echoes still lingering. But now, they didn't scare me, because I understood. Some echoes are not here to haunt. They're here to be released. But there are others, ones that don't want to be heard, ones that stay quiet, not because they're shy, but because they're ashamed. I felt them then, lurking beneath the floorboards. Waiting behind the mirror, clawing gently at the edges of the curtain. These were the echoes that knew what they had done, and knew I did too. That's when the room whispered, forgiveness is not forgetting. It's naming what tried to stay hidden. And I knew I wasn't done, because I had not only been wounded, I had wounded. And the echoes of those I hurt still wandered here. Unspoken, unseen. I whispered into the room, show me who I failed. The curtain opened. And this time, I didn't see anyone else. I saw my reflection, but not as I am. As I was the night I said something I should never have said. To someone who trusted me, and never spoke to me again. His name was Raphael. Another friend. Another almost. I had been cruel, not intentionally, but carelessly, and careless cruelty still leaves bruises. I watched myself in the mirror, not to judge. To witness. And I whispered, I remember, I regret, I release you from the silence. The mirror trembled, and the echo finally faded. Some echoes don't want to be heard, but that doesn't mean they disappear. They become part of the walls, the floor, The air waiting not to punish, but to be acknowledged. The mourner's room is not a place of haunting. It is a place of remembrance. And remembering is never passive. It asks something of you. To return. To feel. To speak what was never spoken. To mourn what you buried in haste, and to name what still walks beside you in silence. You can't close a door that still knows your name. There are doors you lock, doors you paint over, doors you move away from, hoping distance will turn the handle quiet. But no matter how far you walk, no matter how many years stack themselves like bricks of forgetting, there are doors that remember you, and worse, they remember who you were. When you walked away, the mourner's room had one such door. Found it after the echoes faded, after I whispered Raphael's name and felt the heaviness lift. I had expected peace, closure maybe, but instead, a new sound, a click, subtle, behind me like a lock turning. In reverse, I turned to look, and there it was, a door I hadn't seen before. Unlike the others, it was closed. Firm. Wood warped with time, handle dulled with memory. But I knew it. Deep in my chest, I knew it. This was the door I had closed long ago. In a house I never returned to. The house belonged to my father, not biologically, but by presence. He was the man who raised me, or rather overshadowed me. He was thunder in human form. Not always violent, but always loud, opinions like sermons. Anger like weather. He never hit me, but he didn't have to. His silence was enough. His disappointment louder than fists. And the night I turned 17, I walked out of that house and never looked back. Never called. Never forgave. Not him. Not me. The mourner's room now held his door. I could hear it breathing. Not literally. But the kind of breath a place takes when it remembers pain, when it waits for you to come home, just to finally speak what was never said. I reached for the handle. Cold. Like his tone when he was ashamed of me. I turned it. The door creaked open, and suddenly, I was back. In his study, where nothing had changed. The leather chair still creaked in protest. The book still smelled of musk and dust. The photo of him and I framed, but face down. He was there. Not sitting. Standing. Looking out the window, his back to me. Tall, rigid, still, wearing the authority of a man who never learned how to say, "I'm sorry." He spoke first. You always had a way of disappearing. I didn't respond. He turned, eyes tired. Jaw clenched, but not in anger. In memory. You think I didn't try? He said. I stayed silent, because no answer would be fair. No explanation would erase the nights I cried quietly in a house that only praised quiet children. No apology would return the years I lived trying to become someone he would finally approve of. He walked closer. No threat in his steps, only gravity. He held something in his hand. Letter, folded, UNCNT. He offered it. I took it. And read, **** to the version of you I never knew how to love. I see now that my strength was cowardice dressed in control. I see now that your softness was not weakness, but the very thing I feared. In myself, I wanted to be proud of you, but I never gave you the space to be someone worth being proud of. I hope you find the love I could not teach. I hope one day you will return. Not to me. To yourself. ****. I looked up. He was gone. No smoke. No vanishing trick. Just absence. And yet, not emptiness. The room still held him. But this time, it didn't weigh me down. I stepped out. The door behind me stayed open. Wide. And I realized, some doors don't close, not because they're cursed, but because they're honest. Because some pain doesn't get erased. It gets witnessed. And in being seen, it transforms, not into joy, but into something softer than silence. When I returned to the mourner's room, the ribbon I had once tied to the chair was now tied to the doorframe. But not with my name, with his. And beneath it, a note: you can't be free of ghosts until you let them speak. People ask me what I've learned from tending to this room. From tending to these echoes. These chairs, these walls that remember. I tell them this: you cannot close a door that still holds your name, but you can walk through it, that you can hear what you were too hurt to hear. You can forgive what never deserved the weight it left on your chest. You can finally stop standing outside your own past hoping time will burn it down. Time doesn't burn, it waits. There are more doors now, the mourners. Room expands every time I remember, not just the wounds, but the moments I didn't think were worth mourning, the smiles I faked, the friends I ghosted, the dreams I outgrew but never buried properly, and every one of them still remembers me. So I go back. Every night, I open one more, I listen, I grieve. And sometimes, I forgive, not because they earned it, but because I did. Because the longer you let a door stay locked, the louder it knocks. And I'm tired of pretending I don't hear it. The curtain bleeds only when you pretend you don't see it. Most people avoid curtains, not because of what's behind them, but because of what they know they've hidden there. Curtains don't protect, they delay. They say, not now. They whisper, this is better unseen. But the mourner's room had a curtain that refused to be ignored, and it was bleeding, not in the way flesh bleeds. Not thick, not warm, not red, but memory has its own color. And pain knows how to stain. I saw it one evening, a soft drip from the bottom hem. Dark, slow, steady. At first, I thought it was a trick of shadow. But then I touched it. It felt like cold water. But when I brought my fingers to my lips, I tasted something familiar. Not blood. That shame has a flavor. It's not bitter. It's not metallic. It's hollow. A space where something should have been said, should have been done, but wasn't. That curtain knew me. It knew the things I never told anyone, especially not myself. I sat in front of it, watched it sway gently. As if breathing, I waited for the usual whisper, the invitation, eerie voice calling me in, but none came, just silence. Until I spoke first. I see you. That was all it took. The curtain twitched, and then opened on its own. And what lay behind it was a stage. A small theater, dusty, empty seats stretching far back into the dark, and in the center, a spotlight. Waiting. I stepped in. Each footstep echoing across wood that remembered too much. Then a voice, not mine, not the room's, a child's. Do you remember when you lied? The stage changed. Suddenly I was 12 again, standing in front of a classroom, presentation, day. My palms sweating, and on the screen behind me, a project I hadn't made. I had copied it, word for word, stolen it from a book. I thought no one would notice, and they didn't. I got an praised. Applause. But I still remember the girl. I took it from Anna. Quiet, creative, brilliant. She presented after me. And the teacher said, too similar to the last. No originality. She looked at me, didn't cry, didn't speak. Just shrank, a little smaller, a little dimmer. The stage shifted again. This time I was 16. With someone I loved and lied to. I said I didn't feel the same. I did, but I was afraid of being vulnerable, of being known. So I lied. And he walked away thinking he was the problem. When it was me. Scene after scene. The curtain revealed more. Each memory framed like a performance. But I wasn't the audience. I was the actor, and every role I had played to survive, the confident one, the funny one, the detached one, all of them were masks sewn with shame. And the curtain remembered every script. Then, something changed. I wasn't on stage anymore. I was in the seats, watching someone else perform. It was. And as I am now. Older. Tired. Holding every regret like it still had sharp corners. And then the lights dimmed. A final spotlight on one last version of myself. One I didn't recognize. She was still beautiful, terrifying, because she looked free. And she walked toward me, not smiling, just present. And said, You can't bury what you haven't forgiven. I wept out there, in the theater of my own shadows, because I knew the curtain bleeds only when you pretend not to see it, when you keep performing for an audience that no longer exists, when you tell yourself the play is over, but the stage is still warm. I stepped back through the curtain, back into the mourner's room. The fabric no longer stained. It was clean. Light. Breathing differently. I tied a ribbon to its edge, a silent promise. No more hiding, no more roles. Just the truth, however imperfect. The room dimmed. Not in warning. In rest, because even the places that hold our pain need to sleep sometimes. I curled into the chair, and for the first time I didn't dread the dreams, because I knew they would be honest. And honesty doesn't haunt. It heals. The chair was never empty. You just didn't know who sat there. We think of emptiness as absence, a blank page, an unoccupied seat, a silence waiting to be filled. But what if emptiness is not a lack, but a presence we failed to recognize? What if the chair was never truly empty? What if it was always occupied by someone you refused to see? That thought haunted me long after the curtain dried. The mourner's room had gone still, too still, like it was holding its breath again. No whispers, no doors, no flickers. Just the chair, and the sense, the deep, trembling certainty that I wasn't alone, even though I was the only body in the room. I walked to the chair. Paused. Stared at it, its fabric slightly worn from where I had sat countless times, but the cushion was needy. As if someone had just risen, or never left. I reached out to touch it. Warm. Not the heat of sunlight or memory, the heat of presence. Of residue. And then the mirror lit up. But not like before. No flickers, no fragments. This time it blazed, showing not one version of me, but all of them. Every iteration I had mourned, every voice I had buried, every version I had performed or pretended to forget. They were all seated. In the chair, taking turns, each of them a ghost of me that never got a name. There was the child who flinched at loud footsteps, the teen who learned to love in silence, the adult who built walls out of logic, the friend who said nothing when he should have stood up, the lover who left before he could be left. Each one sat in the chair, each one looked back at me. Not accusing. Just waiting to be named, to be owned, to be loved. And as I looked at them, I realized I had never really been alone. Every decision I had made, every fear I had followed, every choice that looked like freedom but felt like survival, had been shaped by someone sitting in that chair, watching. Hoping. Begging to be acknowledged. I dropped to my knees before it. Not to worship. To witness. And whispered, "I see you, all of you. I'm sorry it took this long." One by one, they faded, not into nothing, but into me. Returning. Reclaiming. Pieces I thought were lost weren't gone, just waiting for permission. Then one final figure appeared, unlike the rest. She was cloaked. Veiled. Sitting perfectly still. Unmoving. I knew immediately this was the version I had never allowed to be born. The one who never got the chance to become, because I silenced her before she ever spoke. She removed the veil, and I saw peace. Not perfection. Not joy, but a quiet, steady peace that comes from never needing to explain yourself. From knowing your worth without proving it, from existing fully without apology. She smiled and said, "You weren't ready before, but now you are." I stood. The chair was finally empty, not abandoned. Available. A place now ready to be sat in by the version I choose, not the ones I've inherited. And that was when I realized the true nature of the mourner's room. It was never about the dead. It was about the living we had buried. In shame, in silence, in stories told to us too early and too often. It was a room not for death, but for rebirth. And the chair? It had always known, because it's never truly empty. Even when no one is sitting. It holds Stories. Versions. Echoes. It holds us. Until we are brave enough to return and finally ask, who have I left behind in my own skin? The mourner's room does not offer answers. It offers mirrors. It offers chairs. It offers silence that listens. But it never forgets who you are, even when you do. So next time you feel hollow, don't run from the empty chair. Sit. Ask who's still waiting inside you. And when they speak, listen like it's the first time. Because it might be. The room only closes when you stop pretending you're still alive. Some rooms are never meant to be locked. Not because they are safe, but because they are honest. The mourner's room was never mine, but it knew me better than I knew myself. And the more I visited, the more I saw, it was not a place for endings. It was a womb made of silence. A chrysalis built from grief. It did not bury the dead. It waited for the living to wake up. And I was waking up. After everything I had seen. The names, the doors, the bleeding curtain, the occupied chair. I thought the room had offered all it could. But pain is layered. Healing, recursive, and honesty? Honesty is a staircase with no final step. It began again with a mirror. Not the one on the wall, but a mirror on the floor. Hidden beneath the chair. I hadn't noticed it before. It was small. Circular, old. Framed with carvings in a language I couldn't read, but my bones understood. Lifted it. And what I saw was not my reflection. Not exactly. It was a version of me that hadn't yet happened. Older, wiser, but with a sadness in the eyes that felt familiar. This version didn't speak, but she waited. And I knew this was who I would become if I didn't finish the journey. If I stayed in mourning. If I kept digging graves in my own soul for emotions I wasn't brave enough to feel. The mirror darkened, then cleared. And now I saw my childhood bedroom. Empty, dusty, unchanged. Except for the closet. Its door was open. And inside a child. Small, silent. Me. Crying, just hugging her knees. Eyes wide with something deeper than fear. A kind of betrayal. The betrayal of having to grow up before you were ready. I knelt by the mirror, tried to speak, but words felt too sharp, too crude. So I simply reached forward. My fingers passed through. And suddenly, I was there. In the room, the real one, not a memory, not a projection. The origin. The child looked up, didn't flinch, didn't smile, just waited. And I sat beside her. No rush. No explanation. We were not strangers. We were not even separate. We were the same grief, split by time. And when she finally whispered, "Are you done pretending?" I knew what she meant. I had spent my entire life pretending. Pretending I was strong. Pretending I didn't care. Pretending silence was power. But worse, pretending I was alive when I had long since gone numb. The mourner's room was never a haunted place. It was a place where the dead inside us come to be remembered. And if they're lucky, to be revived. I took the child's hand, and with it, every version of me that had been silenced. Not to rescue her. To join her. To remind her that I still remembered what it was like to feel everything all at once. And be told to stop. I stood, and the bedroom faded. I was back in the room, only this time the walls were pulsing. Not with light, with breath, with awareness. The mourner's room was alive. And it had been waiting. Not for my grief, but for my return to truth. A voice echoed. Not external, not internal. Something beneath. The room only closes when you stop pretending you're still alive. I didn't want to leave, but the door was open now, and there was nothing more to see, because I had seen it all. Not the ghost. Me. The real me. Unlayered. Unperf. ORNED. IDD. Turned back. The chair, the mirror, the curtain, the walls, all still, all silent, but no longer calling. Because I had answered, because I had finally stopped pretending, I stepped out, and the door closed. Not with finality, but with peace. And on its surface, carved in delicate script, "Return when you forget again." We Always remember. I don't know if I'll go back, but I know I can. And more importantly, I know why. I went, not to mourn the dead, but to resurrect the parts of me I had let die quietly, without witness. And now, I carry them. Not as weight, but as truth. And truth? Truth never haunts. It only waits. Patiently. Until you stop pretending. And finally begin to live.